If you've ever been curious about Alcoholics Anonymous, maybe someone has suggested it to you, or maybe driven past a church on a Tuesday night and wondered what's happening in there, this video is for you. I'm going to walk through what AA is, how it works, and I'm going to do it as someone who sat in those rooms myself over 30 years ago. Hello and welcome. I'm glad you're here. Today we're going to do a beginner's guide to Alcoholics Anonymous, what I'd call that foundational map. If you've ever felt confused, skeptical, or curious about what Alcoholics Anonymous or AA actually is and how it works, we're going to cover all of that. Alcoholics Anonymous was founded in 1935 by two men, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob Smith, who discovered their shared struggle with alcohol was something they could talk through together in a way that actually helped. That simple idea that people with a shared experience can support each other became one of the most widespread recovery movements in human history. Today, AA has an estimated 2 million members across more than 180 countries. But here's what I want you to hold on throughout this video. AA is not a cure. It's not a requirement for sobriety. It's one pathway. And for many people, it's turned out to be a very powerful one. Whether it's the right fit for you is something that only you can determine. What I can do is give you an honest, grounded picture of what's inside. Let's start with the 12 steps because they're the backbone of the entire program. And they're probably the thing that most people have heard, but least understand. The 12 steps are a set of guided principles that members work through, usually with a sponsor, which we'll talk about in a minute. They're not a checklist for you to race through. Most people spend months, sometimes years, on certain steps and kind of become an ongoing work in progress. I know for me, what I thought one step meant in early recovery is different now that I've had a little bit more time underneath my belt. Think of them as a map for internal change rather than a to-do list. Let me walk you through the broad arc of the steps because there's real structure here. Step 1 through 3, about admission and surrender. Step 1 is acknowledging that alcohol has become unmanageable in my life. Step 2 introduces the idea of a power greater than myself. And I want to be clear here, that doesn't have to mean a religious God. The program intentionally is flexible on this point. Step 3 is making a decision to lean on that higher power, however you define it. Steps 4 through 9 are about self-examination and making amends. Step 4 is what people often call a searching and fearless moral inventory. Essentially, an honest written account of your life's resentments, fears, and behaviors that have caused harm. Step 5 through 7 involves sharing with another person and asking for help changing. Steps 8 and 9 are about identifying people that you had harmed and, where possible, making amends to them. In other words, cleaning your side of the street. Steps 10 through 12 are about maintenance and growth. Step 10 is an ongoing inventory, catching yourself when old patterns emerge and addressing them in that quick moment. Step 11 is about deepening your connection with a higher power through prayer and meditation. And step 12, which perhaps is the most underestimated of all, is about carrying that message to those that are still struggling, and is to practice these principles in all of your affairs. What I've seen clinically is that the steps, when genuinely engaged with, address something that pure abstinence alone can't touch. And that's the interior life, the guilt, the shame, the patterns of thinking that made alcohol feel so necessary in the first place. That's the deeper work. So let's talk a little bit about sponsorship, because this is one of the most important elements of the program. A sponsor is simply a more experienced AA member who's agreed to help you through the program. They've worked the steps themselves. They've been where you are. They make themselves available to you in a way which a therapist and a doctor typically can't, and that's basically being more accessible in times of need that you would see with a therapist or a doctor. Here's what a sponsor is not. They are not your therapist. They are not responsible for your sobriety. They are not professionals. What they are is a guide, someone who can share what worked for them and walk alongside you as you find what works for you. So how do you get one? Well, you go to meetings and you listen to someone whose recovery you respect, someone who makes that connection with you, someone whose life looks like something you want. And then, this is the tough part, you've got to ask them for help. Most people in AA consider it an honor to be asked. What I know from my own experience and from watching hundreds of clients navigate this is that sponsor relationship is often where the real change happens. Not because the sponsor has some magical answers, because it's a relationship built on honesty and accountability. And for those of us who struggle with alcohol, those two things are in very short supply. And as just a sidebar here, don't expect your sponsor to be perfect. We're all humans and we all make mistakes. But the hope is you build relationships and you learn how to talk and have conversations with people. And when you feel like you need to discuss things that are uncomfortable, they're there to support and help you through that process. So just real quick, if you find this helpful, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe by hitting the bell. I publish every week recovery topics like this one. All right, so let's keep going. One of the things that surprises people about AA is the sheer variety of meetings available. There isn't just one kind of AA meeting. There are several, and understanding the differences can help you find where you feel most comfortable. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. Open meetings are exactly what they sound like. Open to anyone, family members, friends, clinicians, those that are curious about AA. You don't have to identify as someone with an alcohol use disorder to attend. Closed meetings are for people who identify as having a problem with alcohol. Those tend to feel more intimate, more candid. Members often share things that they wouldn't say necessarily in an open meeting. Speaker meetings, which feature one person usually, someone who has significant time in recovery, sharing their story. There's no crosstalk, no discussions, just one person's journey. These can be incredibly powerful, particularly early on, because you hear yourself in someone else's story. Step meetings focus on one of the 12 steps at a time, working through them systematically with a group. These tend to attract people who are actively working the program. Big book meetings focus on reading and discussing the foundational AA text, Alcoholics Anonymous, published in 1939. It's dense and it's definitely sometimes dated in its language, but the core of it holds up remarkably well. Discussion meetings are open format. A topic is introduced and members share their experience around it. These are often where newcomers feel most at home because the format is conversational. My suggestion to anyone exploring AA is try several different meetings before you decide it's not for you. The culture and the energy, the makeup of a group, these vary enormously from one meeting to the next. Finding your room matters. And I will also add a caveat to this, in that I would challenge you when you go to a meeting is to look for those similarities and not the differences. It's always easy to find the differences and say, I'm not like them. However, in order for you to start to build your community, you need to find your similarities. So the challenge is, while you may hear 10 things that you're different, maybe those 2 things that you're similar, let's latch onto those. So let's talk about fellowship. Here's something I think may not get nearly enough attention when people explain AA, and that's the fellowship. Fellowship is the community. It's the people you see every week. It's the conversation in the parking lot after the meeting. It's the phone numbers you have in your pocket from someone who told you to give them a call and really meant it. And this matters enormously from a clinical standpoint. One of the most consistent predictors of sustained recovery across research, across treatment modalities, is connection. Social isolation is one of the most dangerous conditions for someone in early sobriety. The internal voice that says, you can handle one drink, gets much louder when no one else is in the room. AA doesn't just offer a program, it offers community of people who understand at the level that most family members, friends simply cannot, what you're going through. Not because they've read about it, because they've lived it. What I've seen in my practice is the people who struggle most in AA are often those who attend meetings but do not engage in the fellowship afterwards. They sit, they listen, then they leave. And while that even has value, it misses what the program is really offering. The coffee after the meeting, the phone call you make on a hard Tuesday afternoon, the birthday chip celebration with genuine joy. That's where the healing often lives. Recovery is not something you can do entirely alone. Fellowship is AA's answer to that reality. And then there's service work, which is, in my clinical opinion, one of the most underrated elements of the entire program. Service work is exactly what it sounds like. Doing something for the AA community that isn't about you. Setting up chairs before a meeting, making coffee, becoming a group secretary, eventually sponsoring somebody else. Now, why does this matter clinically? Because one of the defining psychological features of active addiction is that narrowing of focus. Everything begins to revolve around the substance. Your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just you and the drink. Service work is the structural opposite of that. It orients you outward. It gives you a role, a responsibility, a reason for showing up that isn't about your own survival. Step 12, carry the message, is the formal expression of this. But you don't have to wait to step 12 to do the service. Most AA groups will tell you, get involved immediately, even if you've been sober for only 2 weeks. There's also something that happens when you sponsor someone. When you watch another person begin to find their footing, and I've experienced this myself, that reinforces your own recovery in a way that very little else does. Alcoholics Anonymous is a peer support program built on a set of spiritual principles, a structured set of steps, and a community of people who know what it's like to lose themselves to alcohol and have found their way back. It's not a medical treatment. It's not for everyone. It works best when it's engaged fully, not just attended. What I've seen over 25 years in working with people in recovery is that AA, when it's the right fit, provides something that no prescription, no therapy session, no amount of willpower can fully replicate. The experience of being completely known by people who understand and choose to stay anyway. That sense of belonging is for many people the beginning of the healing. If you're considering AA, whether it's for yourself or someone you love, I hope this gave you a clearer, more honest picture of what's on the inside of those rooms. And if you have any questions about the steps, about sponsors, about finding meetings, leave them in the comments. I may turn your question into a future video. Someone once told me early in my own recovery that you don't have to see the whole staircase. You just have to take the next step. That's AA in one sentence. One meeting, one phone call, one honest conversation. That's where it starts. In the next video, I'll go over how to find a meeting and what to expect. If this was helpful, please consider subscribing and share it with someone who might need it. I publish new videos every week on addiction and recovery. Real content grounded in both clinical science and lived experience. There's a lot more to come. I'll see you next time. Be safe.